Big question. We're going to talk about the trial for soccer's future. The NASL versus MLSS, or the MLS USSF trial, hotted up. Rocco Commisso, the NASL commissioner or president, shall I say, owner? What is this official?
Owner of the New York Cosmos, the man who on behalf of NASL is backing their suit against U.S. soccer and Major League Soccer. So Rocco is the guy funding the challenge, but he's on paper, he's just the owner of the New York Cosmos. He does not have an official role with NASL's headquarters.
So Rocco Commisso took the stand, in which we found out a couple things, including that he had to admit that he used a burner account to actively bash Major League Soccer. Interesting to see a grown man have to admit that.
So in my conversation with Stephen Bank, UCLA law professor who teaches sports law at UCLA, he mentioned this. He mentioned that there was a disclosure that Rocco had a burner account that he was using to attack the people he didn't like in American soccer. And here is a story via Front Office Sports that has a little bit of detail. Starting in 2017, an anonymous Twitter account going by Global Soccer Fan began attacking Major League Soccer and the U.S. Soccer Federation, comparing their leaders to notorious criminals. The tweets from @fan_global compared MLS Commissioner Don Garber and U.S. Soccer President Sunil Gulati to convicted rapist Harvey Weinstein.
Oh, God.
And the late Ponzi schemer Bernie Madoff. And the person behind the account likely would have remained secret forever. But then former NASL chairman Rocco Commisso spent years funding an antitrust lawsuit against MLS and U.S. soccer, and discovering that lawsuit revealed that Commisso is Global Soccer Fan. He sent the tweets. Not exactly adult, mature behavior on the part of Rocco. Now, here is this is the thing. I'm sort of vaguely intellectually aware that stuff like this happens. I mean, obviously there's been famous instances of athletes in particular being outed as having burner. Kevin Durant famously has had burner accounts and has gotten involved in conversations with fans while pretending to be somebody else. But as Placata says, do we think Don Garber has a burner account? Absolutely, Don Garber has a burner account. 100% Don Garber has a burner account. Now, I tend to think, though, and this is from interacting with these gentlemen over the past 10, 15 years, right? I've talked to Don Garber several times. I've talked to Rocco Commisso several times, although it's been a couple years. I've also witnessed their behavior, seen them conduct themselves publicly. I don't think Don is a tweeter, or I don't think Don posts. Don may use his burner account to keep an eye on things, to see what the conversations are, but I don't know if the man is actively engaging. Like, I get the sense. And
he might tell other people to.
That's true. It could be that other people are doing those things on behalf of Don Garber. I don't think he's above that. I don't think he's above delegating burner action, right? Like, go out there and start a fight with that person because they said MLS stinks, right? That kind of thing. Look, but see, Don's also the kind of guy that will clap back publicly when he thinks the league has been besmirched. So in the case of Jurgen Klinsmann talking about players going to Europe, remember, Don Garber famously got mad at Jurgen Klinsmann publicly for what Klinsmann said while head coach of the U.S. men's national team. Mm-hmm. I don't know that Don Garber's the kind that would need to engage in this. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm misreading him. You never know what people are capable of in their private lives behind closed doors when they're, just imagine Rocco Commisso in his California King, sitting in his mansion or wherever he lives. And now he's in Florence a lot of the time, but, he's a New York guy. And just like, I can't believe they said that about the NAS. Don Garber, he's a criminal. Like, that is hilarious. Hilarious to think about that.
It's sitting up under the covers late at night, like, that guy sucks. I can't believe it. And Nate kind of throwing the gauntlet down. The Madoff comparison is not unfair. He says the double negative equaling the positive.
Yes, it is.
I mean, that was corruption and scamming on just like a completely huge scale. And while I imagine Nate is talking about kind of leveraging, public funds for stadiums and kind of playing the real estate politics game, maybe where he's getting that allusion to Madoff. But Madoff, one of the biggest con artists of all time, that's a heavy one. That's a heavy one.
it's passion, and I get it. And Nate is just speaking from a position of maybe not liking the business model or the way that Major League Soccer has operated, or as you said, leveraging some things and real estate plays and all that stuff. But most of that stuff, and maybe there's things we don't know, sure. And obviously in this case, what Rocco and NASL are suing U.S. Soccer and MLS over is conspiring to hold back competition in terms of Major League Soccer. And there are certainly things that we don't like there. Nate, again, adding Ponzi scheme. Is MLS a Ponzi scheme? We don't have time. Nate's also giving us a winking emoji. We'll leave that alone, right? We'll leave that alone. I did want to bring into this conversation, though, since we're covering this trial. And we put up we've done a couple segments. We have a couple videos on this. And I will remind you, if you haven't seen it, I did an interview with Stephen Bank as things were getting underway that is very informative. And he outlines what's at stake here. And I think what's important to remember, if you haven't been following this trial or this lawsuit since it started in 2017, is that via decision by the judge, they've limited the scope. It is no longer in terms of the judgment that Major League Soccer would have to, U.S. Soccer, maybe because of acting on behalf of MLS or conspiring with MLS. It's no longer the case that U.S. Soccer would have to eliminate the professional league standards, which is what this is really all about. And I guess a quick synopsis of what that is, Rob, for people who don't know. U.S. Soccer put into place rules about what criteria you needed to meet in order to be a first division league or a second division league or a third division league in professional soccer in the United States. It includes things like you have to cover a number of time zones, and the metropolitan areas of the markets that you are in have to be a certain number, and stadiums have to be a certain size, and you have to have this
net
quality
worth
of lights.
Of the owners.
Net worth of the owners. That's a big one. If you're a top level team, your owner has to have a net worth of at least $10 million. If you're a second tier team, it has to be $1 million. Things like that. I'm not sure those are exact numbers, but they're in the neighborhood.
For example, to be a D2 team, Detroit City FC had to get a ghost investor to hit the second division ownership level standards.
Right, because none of the original 5 Detroit City FC owners had the net worth necessary to meet the professional league standards. Okay, so U.S. Soccer put these in place. The lawsuit is basically saying that U.S. Soccer applied them unfairly to NASL, or that they were put in place to restrict NASL to the benefit of Major League Soccer. Anti-competitive behavior, right? Now, the judge has eliminated PLS directly as part of the lawsuit. This is now just about the monetary award, and whether it's not that the PLS themselves are unjust or should be canceled, it's that they were applied unfairly. So it's no longer, the jury's no longer deciding if PLS should go away. They're only deciding if U.S. Soccer applied them unfairly to NASL, and that NASL should get compensated for that. This, after my discussion with Stephen Bank, and the last video we posted with an update, Carmelo Anthony on the stand, you remember this? We talked about Melo, talking about Puerto Rico FC, and how the judge said this is more of an owner issue, not a league issue. Peter Wilt, everybody knows Peter Wilt, right? Peter Wilt, who started the Chicago Fire, who started Forward Madison, who started Indy 11, who started a club in Chicago, who was a part of the original idea around NISA. Peter Wilt, who has written a manifesto on promotion and relegation in America. Peter Wilt is a gigantic figure in sort of I would call it the alternative soccer world. Is that a way to think of Peter Wilt, Robert? Because after he left the Fire, he's not
less corporate approach to it.
He's never been involved in MLS since then, right? He's never directly been involved in MLS. He has been very much kind of the people's champion for the idea that soccer needs to be more open and available to everyone. And he responded on Blue Sky to me about our last video. He said, I think you missed the point of the impact of a potential NASL win, because I outlined it as this is mainly about rich people going after rich people, and ultimately this won't change a lot in terms of how soccer is administered in the United States. He said, it's not just the $500 million and divestment of some in Soccer United marketing. Importantly, it's a change, elimination of PLS, opening up club ownership to all types of ownership classes other than high net worth individuals, opens up potential for open system leagues. Right, again, and this is, Peter Wilt is a champion of that idea, open system leagues. And obviously, if you said there's no longer a requirement that you have a majority shareholder of a club who has a net worth of $1 million or 10 million or 20 or 30 or whatever it is that the professional league standards say, then you could do other things. One of those things, Peter did not mention it, one of those things is collective ownership, right? One of those things is the idea of sort of like the Green Bay Packers, right? Everybody owns a little bit of the club, and then we all vote, and then that, we have a board, and then we don't have to do this thing where we have to find some rich individual, which makes the barrier to entry much higher. Now we can start clubs that are organized in different ways, and that could bring new ways of running soccer in America. Now, I responded to Peter that was not my understanding of what it was at stake in the trial, because that's what Stephen Banks said on Morning Kick-Around, that was no longer in play. Peter saying it maybe not a de jure result of a verdict, but surely de facto. And then the last one here, he said, PLS will likely be softened either way. It was in place long enough to give MLS its hold on a first division monopoly so that they may no longer feel the protection is necessary. Now, I don't have a conclusion to draw. I just wanted to bring in Peter's thoughts here, Rob, and maybe get what you think about what he's saying. The idea that kind of regardless, if I think it only probably happens if NASL wins. But if NASL wins, whatever the monetary award might be, does that then create a scenario in which U.S. Soccer has to say, okay, no more PLS, or let's fundamentally rewrite PLS to allow things like what Peter is talking about?
Just interesting. I mean, what Peter Wilt is asking for, or is bringing to light, is kind of more of a nuance. It's not an absolute. So far, this has come to trial, and so we're discussing the PLS again. SUM, Sports United Marketing, has already been, broken up. So there's already been, progress in that sense. There's been an uncoupling of MLS from the broadcast deal with the national team. So there has already been changes that were in the original claims that has already been an impact. I think that while, it would necessitate an NASL win to have a larger impact on all of these things, but I think it's already done so. I think maybe the most damaging thing is if there is an award, but it's tiny, a la the USFL thing back in the 80s. So like, oh yeah, they did grant the waivers wrong, here's $10 or something like that. I feel like that's the biggest danger, but I think one of these kind of like de facto impacts could be the waivers, some sort of maybe there's some oversight on what leagues receive waivers and some sort of alteration of the waiver distribution process, and maybe there's some sort of intermediary rather than it just be USSF or MLS, or maybe they feel like it's decreed by the judgment that there's already been enough separation, so thanks for your time, and we've already done enough just getting here.
Yeah, like that will feel unfair to Rocco for sure, but to a lot of people who were backing NASL's challenge on principle, rather than I'm a Rocco guy, or I think the NASL was screwed. I think a lot of soccer fans in America just don't like the way things were done, and I don't whether it rises to the legal standard for a judgment, I can't tell you. I'm not a lawyer, but I do think it's really hard to argue that U.S. Soccer didn't, clear the way and do lots of things to benefit Major League Soccer and to help Major League Soccer. Whether that was to the detriment of other leagues, again, that's more of a legal question, right? And there's like a realpolitik view of this, and then there's the what's right, what's just, and what's legal view of this. Because if you're old enough, and I happen to be old enough, you remember when we didn't have any professional men's outdoor leagues of note, right? Yeah. We had like the Western United States Soccer Association, and there were like 4 teams or 8 teams, and they came and went it was like a revolving door of clubs, right? Those days. Major League Soccer is not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. There are lots of things wrong with it. There are lots of ways it operates that don't feel right. But it's kind of difficult to imagine we are even in this moment, if not for Major League Soccer sort of laying a groundwork, right? Like, I don't know. Does the NASL even exist in the form it did, if not for Major League Soccer kind of opening up more of a soccer market? I mean, these are more subjective questions than they are objective things. But that's where we're at with this. It's this notion that like soccer needs to be run in a certain way. That's not how U.S. soccer runs it, and therefore tear the whole thing down. That, of course, butts up against some of the issues that we have. You kind of can't have it both ways. You can't have a strong national federation that puts rules into place that dictates things like an open system and promotion and relegation, and then say, well, but we don't want, we also want antitrust law to be involved in all of this, because if antitrust law applies, people are going to sue anytime anybody makes a decision that feels even mildly anti-competitive. And so I think I understand what Rocco's point is here, that the NASL has done things that make sense, again, legally, in terms of the law, but that doesn't mean it's all sort of like this is the best thing for soccer if U.S. soccer loses, or even if they win. Even if they win, I'm not sure that there's any winners out of this. If it happens that PLS is softened and what Peter says does come to pass, then I could imagine that it'll be at least more interesting and the possibilities will grow. But, and here's the tension, I'm going to bring in my man Jonathan Tannenwald again from the Philadelphia Inquirer. Go read his stuff. As much as I like Peter, he's not the one who will come in without the money up front to own a team, assume he'll make it, not actually make it, then panic and bail, right? And now Peter's seen clubs come and go. He's certainly aware of that. And I'm not going to speak for Peter, but this is always the concern as an American soccer fan, that we don't have clubs that will stand the test of time. And we have to stop salting the earth every time a club comes and goes. There have been markets that have been able to sort of see clubs born from nothing after they've collapsed, after other clubs have collapsed. But there's lots of places where it's like, well, there was a team and they built a fan base and then they went out of business and now nobody does soccer there anymore. And we can't have that. That's not the way to grow the game.
Yeah, there's so many fractured and splintered relationships with the sport and the teams that we don't really want to add anymore. This trial continues. We shall monitor it and continue with it. One of my main takeaways now is just what an imperfect messenger for the change of soccer. Obviously, bringing the funds, Rocco Commisso, to bring this to this point. 7 years of litigation, but an imperfect messenger.
I will also say Peter Wilt has an open invitation, and I extended one over on Blue Sky, an open invitation to come on this show. Love talking to Peter. Been a while. Hi, Peter. Come on Morning Kick Around.
Yeah, that would be great to have Peter definitely come on down here and join us on Morning Kick Around. And if you haven't already done so, hit the subscribe button, Morning Kick Around on YouTube. We are on our way to 1,000 subscribers, and it's going great. Thank you for clicking the button. If you haven't already, do so, please. At MKickAround on the social media platforms, X, Instagram, and Blue Sky. And new to the show, we have a Ko-Fi page. If you're able to do so, please, a one-time donation or maybe a regular thing, ko-fi.com/morningkick.